Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving into one of the most stunning reversals in all of American history. We're going to unpack this sheer, almost unbelievable paradox of a man who was, without question, America's most brilliant tactical general, only to completely transform into its most notorious, universally despised traitor. We are talking, of course, about Benedict Arnold. I mean, how does a guy go from literally shedding his own blood for the birth of a nation to actively trying to strangle it in its crib? Well, we're going to break it all down.
There's actually a haunting monument at Saratoga called the Boot Memorial, and it bears an incredible inscription praising the most brilliant soldier of the Continental Army. But you know what's completely missing from that stone? His name. The monument honors his shattered leg and his battlefield heroism, but it completely, deliberately erases Benedict Arnold the man. It is a really striking representation of his legacy.
Okay, let's dive into this. How did America's absolute best general become its absolute worst traitor? To answer this, we really have to look past the caricature of some mustache-twirling villain. We need to trace the journey of a fiercely ambitious man whose undeniable heroics collided head-on with political slights, crushing debt, and, honestly, his own fatal flaws. Because understanding Arnold isn't just about learning history. It teaches us something profound about human ambition, the fragility of loyalty, and what actually happens when genuine brilliance feels entirely unappreciated.
Part 1. America's Patriot and Traitor. To truly grasp the sheer magnitude of his betrayal, we first have to understand the heights from which he fell. We're unpacking a literal tragedy here, and it starts at the absolute peak of his military career. That pinnacle happened at Saratoga in October 1777. The American Continental Army was facing British and German troops, and the commanding American general, Horatio Gates, wanted to play it safe. But Arnold, combining tactical brilliance with a pretty heavy streak of insubordination, directly disobeyed Gates. He just galloped right into the fray, assumed command of the attack, and led this reckless, victorious charge that completely broke the British line. In the process, his left leg was shattered. But that victory at Saratoga was monumental. It proved the Americans could fight, which directly secured the formal French alliance, and that ultimately made American independence possible 4 years later at Yorktown. Arnold was the undisputed hero of the hour. Part 2. The making of a hero. So how did he even get to Saratoga in the first place? Well, Arnold's early career was defined by this relentless, staggering drive. In May 1775, he helps capture Fort Ticonderoga, securing vital cannons for the Revolution. By November of that same year, he leads a grueling, freezing march through the literal wilderness to lay siege to Quebec. That's actually where he sustains his first severe leg wound. In October 1776, he valiantly defends Lake Champlain, and then, exactly 1 year later, his crowning triumph at Saratoga. At almost every single early juncture of the war, Arnold was right there, outmaneuvering the British and keeping the Patriot cause alive on sheer willpower. His tactical genius during that 1776 Lake Champlain campaign is just thrilling. Let's call it the Valcour Island deception. Facing a massive, battle-hardened British fleet, Arnold essentially built a makeshift fleet of his own. He knew the British commander, Guy Carleton, was a naturally cautious guy, so Arnold aggressively bluffed. He projected immense confidence and engaged in a fierce naval battle. Now, even though Arnold's fleet was ultimately battered and forced to retreat, the deception completely worked. It spooked Carleton into delaying his invasion until the following spring. That single delay bought the Revolution a crucial winter to survive and regroup. It was a real game changer.
Part 3. Grievances and the breaking point.
But here is where the narrative shifts, and the seeds of treason were planted in a really deep bed of resentment. Now, what's really interesting here is the stark imbalance between his efforts and his rewards. On one side of the equation, you have Arnold's massive physical and financial sacrifices. We're talking a shattered leg leaving him permanently disabled, pouring his own personal wealth into funding his troops, and having multiple horses literally shot out from under him in battle. But on the other side, Congress continually passed him over for promotion in favor of much greener junior officers. At Saratoga, General Gates actually stripped him of his command and then deliberately omitted Arnold's name from the victory reports sent back to Congress. Arnold was bleeding for a country that basically refused to acknowledge him. The absolute breaking point hit when George Washington appointed Arnold as the military commandant of Philadelphia in 1778. The pressures just compounded so rapidly. He hadn't been paid his wages in 3 years. Congress flat out refused to reimburse his massive debts from the Canadian campaign. He was relentlessly hounded and investigated for corruption by Pennsylvania's radical governor Joseph Reed. And on top of all that, the widowed Arnold married an 18-year-old named Peggy Shippen, who happened to be the daughter of a prominent loyalist judge. So he was mingling with loyalists, drowning in debt, and feeling completely abandoned by the Patriot government. The stage was set for a disaster.
Part 4. The West Point Betrayal.
Pushed to the edge by uncollected debts, some earthly vices, and a really deep sense of unappreciated genius, Arnold decided to cross the point of no return. 20,000 pounds. That is the staggering sum Arnold demanded from the British. He placed a literal, calculated price tag on his loyalty and on the fate of the American cause. He wasn't just defecting on some moral principle, he was selling out the revolution to finally get the payout he felt he so richly deserved.
And the plot itself was incredibly deliberate. Step 1, Arnold lobbied General Washington, who, by the way, still firmly believed in him, to give him command of the highly strategic fort at West Point on the Hudson River. Step 2, once he was in command, he intentionally weakened the fort's defenses and spread his troops thin. Step 3, he met secretly behind American lines to hand those exact defense plans over to the British intelligence chief, Major John Andre. And Step 4, the British take the fort, which would literally cut the colonies in half, and Arnold collects his 20,000-pound bounty. It was a masterclass in calculated espionage. But the whole plot fell apart in this insane, nail-biting climax. The British sloop that was supposed to carry John Andre away was fired upon, so Andre had to travel back by land. Along the way, he was intercepted by American militiamen. They forced him to strip down, and right inside his stockings, they found Arnold's handwritten plans. Word raced back to Arnold's headquarters. On the morning of September 25, 1780, Arnold received the note that Andre had been captured. And here's the crazy part. General George Washington was literally minutes away, arriving for breakfast. In a frantic, desperate escape, Arnold mounted a horse, and he fled down the Hudson River to a British ship, just as Washington was pulling up to the house.
When Washington was finally handed those recovered papers, he was utterly devastated. He reportedly asked, "Arnold has betrayed me. Whom can we trust now?" Think about that gut punch. That highlights a profound, gut-wrenching personal betrayal. Throughout all the political intrigue and all the congressional slights, Washington had been one of Arnold's only consistent, steadfast supporters. And Arnold had planned to sell him out too.
Part 5. A Traitor's Complicated Legacy.
So, Arnold survived, right? But his reputation absolutely did not. The name Benedict Arnold instantly became synonymous with treason, eradicated from Patriot history. His later years were a really tragic sort of exile. He was commissioned as a British brigadier general, and he proved his ruthlessness by leading highly destructive, burning raids against his former neighbors in Virginia and even his home state of Connecticut. But, even the British didn't really trust a turncoat. After the war, he lived in exile in London and Canada. Despite becoming a wealthy businessman, he was widely despised, he was unable to secure any further military command, and he ultimately died in London in 1801 at the age of 60. A man without a true country.
And this brilliantly illustrates why we return to where we started, the empty boot monument at Saratoga. It just perfectly encapsulates his historical footprint. It commemorates the leg that literally helped win the American Revolution, but it stubbornly refuses to name the man who subsequently tried to destroy everything he had built. He is present in the history books for his deeds, for sure, but he is permanently exiled for his choices. So, I want to leave you with this provocative question. Was Benedict Arnold a brilliant soldier who was just pushed to the absolute brink by a petty, ungrateful Congress? Or was he fundamentally a vain, flawed man who placed his own personal interests above the cause of liberty? The facts are laid out, but the judgment of history remains a truly fascinating debate. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history you think you know.